Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We're so glad you're here today. We have an awesome guest. He's kind of a beast, I got to tell you, man. 5-time Ironman. But today's guest, he leads with strength and humility. Dusty Holcomb is a former CEO, 5-time Ironman, and now an entrepreneur helping leaders trade burnout for clarity and chaos for alignment. But understand this, titles don't define him. What does? He's had a 28-year daily practice of sharing leadership quotes, a belief that self-leadership comes first, and a mission to help leaders build lives, not just companies, that reflect their values. Dusty's the founder of the Arcqus. You'll have to correct me, Dusty, when we talk, because I may have just mispronounced that. The Arcqus Group, and host of Leadership Unlocked, where he unpacks the real defining moments that shape how we lead and live. This isn't performative leadership, it's personal. So let's dive in. Dusty, awesome. Welcome, and correct my pronunciation of your company, because I may have butchered it.
You did not butcher it at all. You got it completely right, Pat. It's Arcqus Group. So thank you so much for having me here. The name is, it's funny, people ask me, they go, what does this mean? Yeah. Well, it's because I'm a nerd, and I went, the Latin word for arch is arc, and the arch is the strongest of the ancient structures, and cus is who. And the reason the arch is strong is because of the keystone. And so my little pea brain said, well, who's the keystone? Leadership is the keystone of success. And, and so that's how I came about the name, but you absolutely pronounced it correctly. And you get an extra bonus points for that.
Yeah. Well, I wrote an article once, and on that very topic, is so many people concentrate on the cornerstone, when in reality, it's the keystone that holds everything together. The cornerstone holds the history and the story behind the arch or the arc or the building in general. Mm-hmm. But the keystone, and it's like, that's why Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State. That whole history, that words do mean something, and we should be conscientious of what we say and how we use our words. And that is a total off script insight, because you triggered a memory. I'm fascinated because we've talked offline, and that for the last 28 years, you've led, learned, and served. And you said from the call center to the C-suite, and from boardrooms to backwoods trails. Tell us about that. How'd you get started on this journey?
I would like to say that I had a master design, and I just had a playbook and I planned it, but I didn't, because I'm not that smart. And, I would say that my principal moment, like an inflection point for me, or maybe an unlocking for me, happened when I was working in the call center for a great leader. And I had someone who introduced me, and I was 20 years old, to the principles of servant leadership. He was a retired colonel, a West Point guy, Vietnam veteran. And I was this 21-year-old, maybe snot-nosed punk who was trying to get promoted. And Colonel Camp, kind of took me under his wing and introduced me to the tenets and principles of servant leadership. And that's when he helped me understand. And I didn't know this. I was not a selfish person. I wasn't, arrogant, in the way of it was all about me. But I didn't realize that leadership wasn't about you. And what he taught me was leadership is not about you. It is your mission and purpose to enable success in others. And when you do that well, the organization succeeds. And when the organization succeeds, the customer is succeeding. So like you get this beautiful symphony of success when it's not about you. And so I would say of all the things or causal factors for me, getting tucked under the wing of a leader who taught me what leadership was and wasn't was probably the most impactful thing that's ever happened in my life.
Wow. It what you just shared reminds me of one of my favorite books by Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy.
Yes.
And followed by and this next book I've read 3 times. And the first time I read it cover to cover. Then the second time I had a pen and a highlighter and was writing notes. And the third time I actually had a legal pad and I took 17 pages of notes of stuff that as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God. And it's called Deliberate Discomfort by Lieutenant Colonel retired Jason Van Camp. West Pointer, played football, and made it up through the ranks and assignments, and retired out of Special Forces. And that whole concept about leadership and servant leadership and resiliency in the face of obstacles and sometimes even tragedy. And in that book, he actually had 2 living Medal of Honor recipients share their stories of overcoming. He calls it discomfort. When you get your legs blown off, that's a little bit more intense for me than calling it discomfort, but intentionally overcoming and taking action and crushing obstacles. So you're fortunate that at the young age that you had that kind of impact. So, man, I got so many questions for you.
Let's get into it.
And just for the heck of it, only because I was talking about two books I believe everybody should read. And I got to add to that, the absolute best ever time for all time is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah, Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, I'm rereading that right now. I mean, here and I'm chopping it up. You know, his daughter actually did a kind of a. She didn't change any of his original work, but there's some additions to it. In this edition came out in where's the copyright? Because the original was 1936, 2022. So there's
I haven't reread the newest one.
Yeah, and so it's the second revised edition of the first. Timeless.
It's in my top 10 list for sure.
Yeah. So what's one book you believe everybody should read and why?
So I read this book every year, and I don't remember which one of the great philosophers said this, but you never step in the same river twice.
Yeah.
And so I feel that about great books. And there are some books that just need to be reread and reabsorbed. And for me, one of those is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Mm.
And the reason that book is so powerful for me, and I think it's a book that everyone should read, is because it allows you, when you really understand it, to understand the principle of agency, that you have agency of choice. And so that we are not sitting here in life waiting for the world to happen to us, but we have a choice between stimulus and response. And that's the uniquely human attribute. And I think it's so powerful to reread that. I prescribe it to clients I work with. I give it away. I gave it to my 17-year-old daughter, and she loved it. And so I was doing a little happy dance, because you've arrived when one of your kids, especially if they're a teenager, says, "I really enjoyed that, Dad." And that's why that book is so powerful. I reread it every summer. It's most people think I'm crazy when I whip that out at the beach, but it is my annual reread, and I've never read the same book twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I call it, and I first read that in high school, mm-hmm. and I'm 68 years old, so that it had an impact. That and The Diary of Anne Frank I think were 2 of the most impactful books I'd read in high school. But I like your analogy, that we always have a choice, and I call it the lazy river ride. If you choose to, it's like my most hated expression ever, and if I ever want to just, and my wife is the same way. If I just want to, poke poke the bear a little bit. I'll say it to her, just to get her blood pressure up. It is what it is, and she hates it more than I do. But in my world, it is what it is a mindset of surrender, of that you have no control over your life, and you're gonna jump on the raft and ride to the lazy river, and it always brings you back to the same place that you started. You go nowhere.
Mm.
And there might be some nice little scenery along the way, but you're floating by. You can't even get off to the lazy river to enjoy it. And I think in looking at your life and your journey is that whole concept of intentionality, and is obvious. I mean, 5-time Ironman. What's behind that? I mean, I was in Hawaii with my wife in 2024 when the
Hmm.
International Ironman was. We were leaving the day it was starting, but that week that we were there, I'm meeting all these competitors at the resort that we were staying at, and I'm just like, holy crap! How do you guys do this? I couldn't run 10 miles, let alone a marathon and bicycle and swim 3.5 miles or whatever. So tell us, how'd you get to be an Ironman?
Well, I think it's more of a marker, maybe a lack of intelligence or just like a lot of grit and resilience. It's funny. I had this deep seated, maybe I recognize it now as not a flaw or a character flaw, but a character trait in that when someone tells me I can't do something, I want to find a way. And so as I was getting into bicycling and, love being active, the hardest thing I could think of it was an Ironman race. Like, well, I could go do a marathon, but that's not hard enough. So I did a sprint triathlon and I loved it. And I went, well, that was fun. What's harder? And I could have done an international distance or a half iron, but instead I said, the big dog, let me go do a full Ironman race because I'm 6'4". I'm a more linebacker than I am, the typical endurance athlete. And I decided, you know what? People said that, a big guy like me shouldn't be doing that type of stuff. And I went, I can do it. I can get a little
Yeah.
chip on my shoulder.
Here,
So
here,
I
here,
did.
here, hold my beer.
Yeah. And so I did, and I loved it. And what I loved about it, Pat, was the race day itself is a reward. And that's the day where you get to be present during the experience because of the work you put in to earn the right to be there. If you're worried about whether or not you're capable of making the swim or capable of doing the bike or capable of finishing the run, that you're worried because you didn't do the work. But if you've done the work, then you've earned the right to be there. Now, I can't control whether or not I get a flat tire on the bike course, but I can control whether or not I know how to change the tires. Like going back to your, it is what it is. I can't control certain aspects or elements. I can't control, the temperature or the weather, but I can prepare. And my first Ironman race, I remember this moment and standing on the beach in Florida, getting ready to go out into the ocean with 2,500 other people all at the same time and having this incredible calm because I knew that I had done the work. I mean, I had trained for a year. I knew I'd done the work. I knew I'd put in the effort. And I just knew that the day was going to be. And as long as I did my part and followed my training and followed what I had prepared, that it'd be okay. And so that became one, and I loved it. I finished the race and went, wow, this is incredible. And you learn a lot about yourself on the backside of a Ironman marathon. When you've been out there 12 hours or 10 hours, and you're like, you still got another 10 miles to go. You learn a lot about yourself, about grit, resilience, and one foot in front of the other. But I knew I had to do another one, so I ended up doing 5 before I hung up my shoes. I did 2, 3 weeks apart. I wouldn't recommend that. I would not recommend that. That's a little bit of a exercise in extreme stupidity. But I loved it because it was about the working the plan and then showing up and enjoying the experience. And, taught me a lot about how to set goals, taught me a lot about how to plan for eventualities. It taught me a lot about time management. Like if you're going to train 20 hours a week for the last 12 weeks before a race, you got to be really good at, getting the most important things done, professionally, personally, all that. So it was an incredible experience. And, I miss racing. I want to get back into it eventually, but now is not that season where I can put those hours there and be willing to take that from the family or the other life accounts that I would have to debit in order to do that. And so it's intentionally not the right season, but I want to go back because there's nothing like it.
Wow. How much did the concept or the actuality visualization is that a technique or a tool that you used, and how do you train your mind to do that?
Yeah, very much a tool, and it was a tool I was introduced to through sports, and then applied there, and now it's a tool I use in everyday life. Showing up for if I'm giving a keynote speech, or if I'm going into a workshop, or if I'm just planning my day, visualizing a successful day. And I think it's the intentional coding of what you want to have happen, and then it just happens. And for those that play sports, if you see someone who is playing stiff or playing tight, they're trying too hard, they're the one that it's the bottom of the ninth, 2 out, and the ball is hit to them and they drop it because they're just playing too hard or too tight. Visualization for me was the way of letting go of the too tightness and just experiencing and then success in advance. And then if it didn't go that way, I'd already planned for it. I could adjust it, but it was absolutely, that was my part of my training routine. It was part of my morning routine before a race. Stand there, breathe, envision the swim, and not let myself. You don't think about a whole race. When you're racing 140.6 miles, you don't think about the whole race at the time. You think about where's the next buoy, where's the next 10-mile marker, where's the next milepost on the run, and just visualize yourself getting there. And man, like knowing that what it felt like was going to feel like to cross the finish line. Just hey, when you go to a dark place, you just go to there, and that suddenly you're there.
What? Let's kind of talk about that a little bit. Ironman is not a team sport.
No, it's not.
How do you condition yourself to maintain that competitive mindset in spite of the isolation of the time and the work you're putting into for the eventual event?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and the reason I like it is because it isn't a team sport; it's a selfish sport. Like, to be real, it's a selfish sport because if you're preparing and you're going to go ride on your bike for 6.5 hours on a Saturday, and you're going to go ride your bike for 3 hours on a Sunday, followed by a 1 hour run, those that time is coming from somewhere, and it's either from family or from other obligations, and you're choosing to put it there. And the way you condition your mind is, and I, to be honest with you, I think I did my very best or some of my best professional work when I was doing those events and doing that training, because during that time, my mind was free to think. I didn't have AirPods in, I didn't have music going on, I didn't have any of those distractions. And so either gave myself space to recover or space to think. But I can think of every single race I ran and I was thinking about, what I was feeling on the bike in the dark spots, on the run in the dark spots. And you just go, this sucks. Like I'm going to now just got to go, got to keep going. And I'll give you an example. The race I did that were the 2 Ironman distances 3 weeks apart. The first one was Ironman Lake Tahoe, and it was the first year they ran it. It was an incredibly challenging race, a lot of elevation on the bike, and at altitude, and it had a 25% DNF rate, did not finish rate for that race. And so I did that one, and the 3 weeks later, I was coming off and doing the Ironman Wilmington. Well, I knew at about mile 70 on the bike that I was in trouble. I knew that I was just out of gas. I had not replenished my carbohydrate storage. My body was just, I was not recovered. But I could choose. I could choose to quit. and say, well, that was a failed experiment. Or I could choose to grind it out and see what I could do. And that's what I chose to do. I wanted to see what I could do. And so for me, one of my strategies was I'm going to have 3 goals for every race. I'm going to have my A goal. If everything goes perfect, this is what I should expect for myself. If if something goes wrong, here's what's okay, right? Here's like I'm allowing for this. It's not perfect, but I've adjusted. And C is finish the darn race. Like if I can, if I'm not going to put myself in physical jeopardy, I will finish the race. And it's those moments when I would go to those dark spaces that the isolation would set in. And instead of letting it be being a victim of aloneness, I would say, and this is where I get to prove to myself that I am making this choice. I am making this choice to continue. I am making this choice to go to the next section or whatever it is. Did it suck? Sometimes. But it was the ability to both be present with myself and then make an intentional choice that I found to be so powerful. And if I was distracted by other people, other things, all this other stuff, sometimes that's easier to quit. But when you are only held account to yourself, I just wouldn't let myself quit.
Wow. Now, how get into some tougher questions?
Please
How do you translate that in your coaching and mentoring and consulting business to a CEO, whether it's a small family-owned business or Fortune 100 or Fortune 10? How do you translate those concepts from that individuality experience, where, quite frankly, that it's you're in complete control in a sense of your destiny. If the wake is a lot higher, or the wind, I mean, there's external things, but translating that into the business world, or in your family life, or in your faith life, what's that look like?
Yeah, I think I love this. So the way I think about it is, what are the principles in play? And so I'm a big believer in first principles. Like, all right, well, let's get the first principles. And then once we establish those and understand those, then we can go to the next thing. So a first principle thinking in regards to being able to execute an event like that is, what's my goal? What is the outcome I am trying to achieve? And then what is the second principle, which is, what is the work I need to do to get there? And so in my work with clients, and I was just yesterday working with a client of a very successful, he's a CEO and founder of a very successful e-commerce company. And we were talking about the definitions of outcomes, because many times leaders, and myself most certainly included, will get bogged down into how things get done. But instead of going, what are the outcomes that we are targeting, and how are we enlisting other people to bring those to life? We don't tell them what to do. We tell them where to go. We get them engaged in the vision, et cetera. And so when you start thinking about this, and you start thinking about the principles here are, what is my goal? What do I need to do to get there? In an Ironman or an individual endurance event, maybe that's unilateral. Maybe that's just me. I got to go do the work. But in a team environment, like, I need to clearly articulate and communicate, where are we going? Why does it matter? How are we going to get there? Where do you fit in? What's in it for you? Like, I have to be able to connect those dots, because if it's all in my control, in my little head, it makes perfect sense. But I think that applies in leadership. I think it applies in business. I think it applies in our faith. Like, what's our goal with our faith? To get closer to God, to get an understanding of what's important, like to live. And so, like, the older I get, the more I learn, the less I know. And so the simpler things become, whether in parenting, like the ability to capture clearly and articulate cleanly the outcomes we're trying to achieve, the goal, why we're here, our purpose, I think is one of the most powerful things that we get to do as leaders and as humans and as influencers. And it's also one of the hardest things to do, because we have to translate what's in our head into someone else's head and make it matter to them. And it goes back to that principle that Greg taught me. Leadership's not about you. So if you're trying to tell people why they should care about something as much as you do, you're going to fail. But if you try to connect the dots for them so they understand why it matters to them, you can unlock passion. But they've got to care. Like, they still have to do the work. But that's where my head goes in answer to that question is define the outcomes, define the goals, and then work backwards.
Wow. Ed, one of the first things that kind of came to mind towards the end there, there's a fine line between there's two fine lines. There's a fine line between telling somebody what to do to reach a goal or an objective and showing them what to do. That's one fine line. And then the fine line, because everybody goes, oh, well, lead by example. Well, there's a fine line between leading by example and doing somebody else's job for them because you were raised with the mantra, if you want it done right, do it yourself. So how do you check yourself from a leadership, particularly if you're in a positional leadership? You're the CEO, you're the COO, you're the quarterback, whatever it is, that you've got the bars, stars, and stripes. So people have to listen to you. How do you keep that ego in check, or that desire to not fail or allow failure, but at the same time not pivot away from your core values and objectives to just please the stockholders, or it's the easy way, the easy path to take? So, what are some things you do personally to, reinforce and have that consistency and not get burned out?
Yeah, I think it starts with another first principle for me, which is, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And in order to lead and have influence over anyone else, you have to lead yourself first. Like, all leadership begins with self-leadership. And so if you created an anchor or bedrock of values and beliefs, then it doesn't mean that saying the difficult things will be easy. It doesn't mean that you're going to you're not going to struggle with being able to have the hard conversation, or tell someone something that isn't what they want to hear. But if you've anchored to what truly matters to you, your principles, then you know that you have what you need to do is necessary. What you need to do is best, whether it's for a broad constituency or whether it's better for that one person. I take a great pleasure, and there are people that I've had to have tough conversations with about whether they were in the right role in an organization, and many years later we're still friends, because it wasn't it wasn't personal. And I think that that's something that we just have to we have to really watch out for. It's something I do, is I have to step back and go, this is not personal for me. I may feel very personal, and it's going to feel very personal to another person if I'm the one who's having to convey a tough decision, but it's not personal. So I'm going to treat everybody with dignity, honor, and respect. I'm going to make sure that we're doing the right things. But being able to have those principal bedrock values and beliefs in place, make those decisions and conversations easier, but not or simpler maybe, but not easy, right? They're just clearer. And I think it's so incredibly important. One thing that came to mind as you were asking the question about what I do and how I think about it is, the ability to pause and step back and simply breathe and go, is this really the most important thing? Is this about me, or is this about whom I'm serving? And, I know that if I get wrapped around the axle and I'm worried and I have fear and doubt and all these things, that I've gone inwards and I'm focused on me. And so I've got to break that cycle. And I think that we all fall victim to that. And so it's just work. It's just constant work. For me, that's prayer and devotional and meditation and, alone time and thinking. But being able to disconnect and go to your principles, I think is the most important thing.
Wow. The right people in the right roles.
Mm.
uh, I want to say, is it Mark Miller? There's a guy out there that wrote a book a lot about having the right people in the right roles and defining that whole process
Mm.
of getting to where you want to go in the corporate, world, so to speak. And one of the things that I've always kind of struggled with in execution of being in leadership positions, particularly when it was positional as well as I agree with you. John Maxwell's leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Is everybody focuses? They go, well, just do the right thing. And my challenge has always been in executing and doing the right thing is to make sure that I was doing it at the right time, doing it the right way, and doing it for the right reasons. Because I could do the right thing, but if I do it too late, or I do it too soon, or I do it the wrong way, I don't delegate something because do it yourself if you want it done right, and that's not the right way to do it. It's to delegate it to the supervisor or or whatever, or I do it for the wrong reasons. We were famous in law enforcement that if you had somebody that was retired on duty, they were just there for a paycheck. Is okay. I'm going to teach them a lesson. I'm going to make them a field training officer, so they're going to have to work for that paycheck, and I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. And then not only do I not accomplish changing that person's retired on duty mindset, I've just now corrupted the rookie cop that is going to be, that's how they're going to be taught. So what's some advice that you would give folks that are facing those kinds of I know what the right thing to do is and I have this obstacle, but statistically 50% of the population are introverts and they're going, ooh, I don't feel comfortable because that's not my personality. So how do you bridge that gap between that's not me, having that difficult conversation. Well, that's not me because I'm an introvert. I don't want to what's the answer?
Well, I think the answer is it depends, and that's always the pat answer, right? But I think the way I would address that, and I vacillate between, I'm a borderline introvert personally, which simply means I need alone time to recharge. Now I can have this conversation, I can speak on stage, I can do all those things. I just need downtime. Like I get energy from that recycling. And, I think as a society, we're brought up to please people. We're brought up to follow the rules. We're brought up to, and so we want to please others. And when we have to have hard conversations or doing the right thing that isn't pleasing, it feels challenging. And so what I like to recommend to folks, and, have done this for a long time myself, is okay, well, then what do I need to do in order to make this easier? I need to capture my thoughts. I just need to write down my reasons. I need to prepare. So if I'm an introvert preparing for a difficult conversation, I need to spend my alone time leveraging my skill, leveraging my gift of being able to be alone and quiet with my own voice and spend time preparing. And then I need to practice the speech. I need to do whatever the thing is that will allow me to show up and do the necessary thing as effectively as I can for that other person. And even when it's a difficult conversation, you said something a minute ago, and I love to use this as a distillation lens. And I have to do this to myself all the time, Pat, because And I think all leaders do, because we're good at what we do. And there are things that we can do and do well, but we don't delegate because it would take longer to teach somebody. They're not going to understand the way we want it done. They're not as good at it as we are. And the way I like to think of in terms of judo, how do you use force redirected? And the
Mhm.
judo question I like to ask myself is, am I the only person on this planet that can do this thing at the level in which it needs to be done to achieve the mission? And many, many times the answer to that is no. And then the question is, so why are you the one doing it? Sometimes I need to be the one. Sometimes there's
Yeah.
not someone else to delegate it to. But if there is someone else, then I have to go, well, then it's about you. What do you need to do differently in order to give someone else an opportunity? Because they may be better at it than you are. This may not be the thing that only you can do. And so that's the other thing, is I like to think about this through the lens of, what is it that only I can do? There's only a few things that I, as the CEO of an organization, can do that I cannot delegate, that I cannot, give anyone else responsibility and accountability for. Well, then I need to do those things and do those things exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And so, like, that, those are some of the things that I think about. But I like to and like, we can make excuses, and people do all the time. I don't want to have this challenge because of I'm an introvert, because I don't like conflict, because it doesn't negate the fact it still needs to happen. And so
Mm.
you just have to go, well, what can I do? Back to man's search for meaning. What is the choice I can make, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I don't like it, but I know it's necessary. And in 24 hours, it'll be over. In an hour, it'll be over.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes, it'll be over.
Yeah. Now this is going to be kind of sound like it's coming out of left field, and we're, this is a recorded, podcast. We're not streaming it live, but just a couple days ago, or a little bit more than a couple days ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers lost a playoff game, and Mike Tomlin was the head coach. And he held a team meeting the next day. He still had a year on his contract. But to take what you're talking about, everything you just said, that is immediately what came to mind, is Mike Tomlin made the decision that the best interest of the organization to achieve the goals and objectives and how to get there, and all those different things that are going on, is after 19 years, and he still had a year left on his contract. It's for the right thing to do, the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, is I retire, I resign, and not because that egocentric thing is, well, I'm going to stick around. That whole flight, fight, or freeze is, well, I'm going to be smash mouth, and we're going to come back and we're going to win the Super Bowl next year. That's not in your control. As the head coach, the injuries, all those things that can happen. But he took that 24-hour. You talk about taking that time to reflect, and made that tough decision. And so often we our ego gets in the way, and we know what we should be doing, but damn it, I'm better than that. I can make this happen. I kind of deal. That's what I was thinking as you're sharing those insights.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I actually read an article before Tomlin, retired and decided to retire, and they were talking about, the article was, is the Rooney family going to make a change? Did the Steelers need to fire Tomlin? And the author was saying, the Rooney family hasn't fired like a head coach in 40 years. I think that's just not their culture. And so when you talk about Tomlin, him making that decision is precisely the culture of the Rooney family and of the Steelers organization. Like, the right person who's been there 19 years, has won Super Bowls, has been very successful. He's culturally aligned. He made a decision that was aligned with values and principles, and they're aligned with the organization's values and principles, which is why he was there for 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
Could he have gone there for 20? I'm sure he could have. This person said, hey, the Rooney family is not going to fire him, but he didn't think it was right for the organization. And, he made that decision. I have so much respect for that. Knowing when to do that doesn't make it mean it was easy. Didn't mean it was, probably not soul searching for him.
Yeah.
But he knew it was the right thing for the organization.
Right. And when we use, I'd love you use the word culture, particularly in society today, you say culture and immediately people jump to ethnicity. Or something else, when in reality, like you'll hear it in law enforcement, pundits, critics, activists, whatever. Oh, you need to change the culture of policing, and we don't know we don't define culture, and because you can't change something if you don't know fundamentally define what it is that culture is. And so in my book, when I hear people talk about changing culture, or when I'm given training or keynote speaking and consulting stuff, is I define, when I say culture, this is what I mean. What do we expect and accept in our organization in the way of thinking, talking, and acting? Mm-hmm. And when you say that the culture, like of the Steelers, of the Rooney family, and all that, and Tomlin embraced that and lived it out by going, what is expected and accepted way of thinking, talking, and acting is the mission, the vision, the goals, and having the right people in the right place. And I'm not that person. And I don't want to punt it, using a football, I don't want to punt it to the Rooneys that they got to make a decision that is in my control and my responsibility. So that's all that just triggered that whole thing. And one of the other things it triggered is, and I've been doing this for years, in training, when you talk about the first principle, and people go, they start talking about core values, or they give a bunch of examples of what the principle looks like, but that's not what I'm asking you to, write down and define. And so I have people, I literally tell them, it's this simple. I got one question. Actually, I have two questions for you. The first question is, if your funeral is tomorrow, what are people, in one sentence, what are people going to say about you? And that one sentence is them expressing what impact you had on their life. Mm-hmm. So what are they going to say? And if you go, well, they'll say I was kind of the north end of a southbound horse at times, I go, they're probably not going to be at your funeral. So that's the first question. What are they going to say? But here's the real challenge is, what do you want them to say? Mm-hmm. And I call that your life sentence. At the end of your life, in one sentence, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? Write it down, and then write down, what are you doing to not live that sentence? And what are you doing to live it? And that helps you stay focused. And what you would call the first principle, I just call it the life sentence. If I die today, my funeral's tomorrow, what do I want people to say? I'll tell you right now, what I want them to say is, Pat impacted my life in a very positive way. He made a difference in my life. And that helps me stay focused on, when I face the difficult decisions, the difficult conversations, or whatnot, is how can I positively impact this person's life, and not judge, not condemn, not question, not tell them what to do or that they should have done. is how can I do it in a positive way that will make them a better person, us a better organization, whatever, whether it's in your family life, your community life, your faith life. It's so easy to be critical and not be positive. So that's kind of, I don't know. That's one of my biggest struggles is how to maintain, living that life sentence. In your experience, I mean, what do you? And you shared some stuff, but what do you struggle with the most? That is, as Paul would say in Scripture, that's that thorn in your side you can't seem to get rid of.
I love this question. The thing that comes to mind for me, and I love your life sentence, like the personification of values in action, so that what you can say no to the things that aren't that, right? I'm a big believer in deciding in advance what is and is not important, so you give yourself permission to say yes to the most important things. What I struggle with, and I continue to work on this every day as I work to lead myself. And, I have a coach I work with, and I've had a coach for 25 years. I think it's it's something, I just believe in, and always trying different, working on yourself, getting different coaches. The ability to say no to good things. And so you can say yes to only the great things. Like, I will always struggle with that because there are so many good things to do. There are so many good opportunities, good people to help, good things to do. And saying no to really good opportunities so that you can say yes to only the precious few great things is something that's the thorn in my side. And I will, and if I were to ask my wife or my family, they go, yeah, Dusty manages to put, a lot into an 8 or 10 hour day. Like, there's nobody more. And it's because there's just so many good things to do. There's so many opportunities to serve and to help. And, I will always and forever have to work on that relentless distillation to do really what you're talking about. How do I bring the life sentence to life? Right? How do I execute against that? And it's giving myself permission to say no.
Yeah.
Permission to say not yet. And, in my work with leaders, I've got something I'll give your audience when we get done, but it's like, you've got to decide these things in advance, and you have to communicate them to others so that they know what the expectations are and, how you show up, what your rules of engagement are. That's my thorn in my side, and I will probably always be working on it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Reminds me of a great book that I just finished reading. Is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And that whole concept of, well, yeah, there's this really great opportunity over here, but there's this immediate one right here. I'm just going to split the difference, and we'll work towards that other thing later. And you split the difference, and it's like, and he does it because, he talks from a negotiation standpoint, is know those core values, the non-negotiables, and then don't deviate from them, even if the decision you're making is going to be to your detriment. We have to have those non-negotiable core values, and then share those with other people. I trained thousands of military law enforcement, and I did. I'm not going to mention the branch, but I did 8 different bases, and in a period of about 6 or 8 weeks.
Wow!
And one of the things was the call to action. Why they hired me was, we need to change the culture of this particular division within the broader military force. And so I got there, and each place I went to, I walked around looking for an external mission statement that the troops, and this was all law enforcement, could see every day. And in only one base did I actually find their mission statement posted externally, not not in a binder, but actually people could see it. And it was in the men's bathroom, and it was on the back of a stall. It was not just a stall; it was the handicap stall. They literally that's where I found a copy of their mission statement. And so when I sat down with lieutenant colonels that were in charge of these different units, my question to them was, tell me, what's the mission statement of this particular unit?
Mm-hmm.
And some of them could say it, most of them could not. And then my question, the follow-up question is, if you don't know your mission statement, how can you hold your people accountable to execute it in their day-to-day jobs? And so one of the things I liked about Chris Voss is that there has to be those non-negotiables, and like you say, those great things that you're not going to give up on or cheat on to try and accomplish.
Could not agree with you more, Pat. And I think that the key there is a self-leadership principle is you have to decide those things. You have to do the work in advance so that you know them. You have to decide, I'm going to know this mission. I'm going to live this mission out loud. I'm going to say it so many times that I'm sick of it. And only when I'm sick of it will it start to really resonate. Do I know that it's going to echo? But you've got to do the work in advance. You can't just show up and be in reaction mode and go, well, what's important to me? I don't know. We'll just split the difference. No, if you've decided in advance and done the hard work, then you can be prepared for those conversations. That's one of the things that I put together maybe 15 years ago now, was this practice of writing my rules of engagement. And I would share that with everyone on our leadership team. And then eventually our leaders started, writing their own, and they would share them with their people, and it became part of our culture. But it was really the codification of, here's what I believe, here's how I show up, here's how I will best receive information, here's how, just giving people basically a decoder ring for me so that I could remove ambiguity for them and really help them. And then the way I like to think about this is, I'm telling you what I believe, and if I don't act that way, I'm giving you permission to call me out.
Yep.
And not just permission, it's an expectation. If I tell you this is how I believe people should be treated, and if I ever act in a way that is incongruent with that, not only should you call me out, you must. That's an expectation. Like, hey, Dusty, you just demonstrated something that is not aligned with something in your beliefs that you told me to tell you, and I'm going to say thank you very much. And that'll be one of the things, Pat. Like, if your audience is interested in that, I make that as a resource available, and I encourage all leaders to spend 30 minutes, of time, just writing out, what are the things what are my values? What do I believe? How do I show up? What's important to me? How do I communicate most effectively? Because when you give this to your teams, they know, hey, Dusty likes the bottom line up front. Don't bury the lead at the end of the thing. Right? Come in, give them the bottom line up front, and then we're going to talk about what matters. And it makes everything else goes so much more smoothly. So I'll share the link with you at the end. But that's something that I think is, if every leader could do that for their team, not for them. It's not about them. It's about how to make their team more effective. I think that leadership, the amount of energy that's wasted in organizations would decrease dramatically, because we're not having to have conversations about things that don't matter. We know what the expectations are, and we know how to communicate.
Absolutely. And people need to understand, no ifs, ands, or buts. It may cost you dearly, professionally, personally, or whatever, to have that, what I call that warrior mindset, that you stand up, show up, and defend what you believe. It can cost you. And what immediately came to mind as you were sharing those insights is over 30 years ago, I was general counsel of a very successful corporation, and the CEO, founder of the company, in front of other employees, did something that was completely in opposition to, contrary to the expectations and standards that he had put forth and repeatedly. And after it happened, I'm not going to give you the details, but after it happened, I stopped by his office and go, "Hey, after 5 o'clock today, I need to chat with you." And because this was of a personal matter, it wasn't a corporate matter, but it was his behavior in front of other employees. And in fact, it was the way he was talking to his wife in front of other employees. And so after hours, I sat down and sitting on the other side of a conference table, and I shared with him, "Hey, this is what I saw happen, and this is what you preach and expect from our folks." And I even had an employee after that happened, that same day, before I had the meeting, she came to my office and sat down and goes, "Why would I ever want to be a Christian if that's the way Christians act?" And so I sat down and had that conversation with him and shared my concerns. And his one and only response was, "You're fired. Pack your shit up and leave." Literally on the spot. And so I lost a job. But I have that, I'm not splitting the difference, mindset. And I had those core values that are non-negotiable. So it can cost you, but, and my wife goes, "Don't keep saying but, say and, you will be a better person for it." And from a scriptural standpoint, if you want, you're not going to be harmed. God's going to reward you, maybe not in this lifetime, but there are eternal consequences for how you do things or don't do things. So
I kudos to you. And yes, those temporary things happen for you, not to you.
And that's the mindset that it's so foreign to us, is that we concentrate more on what's happening to us than what's happening in us. And we jump to those negative. I mean, I was reading some research the other day. We have 50,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them, 40,000, are negative, because we're concentrating on what happened to us rather than what is happening in us. How are we being transformed, and is it for the good or is it for the bad? And that's when you get those wake up calls. I don't want to have a Saul Paul kind of encounter of God's literally got to knock me down and blind me to get my attention. I don't want to have those kind of experiences. So I hope that when I'm straying off the path, that I get the nudges from the right people at the right time and the right way to go, "Pat, get back on track." Go ahead.
I was going to say, I could agree with you more. That's and giving people permission to do that and asking for them to do that, I have found to be, you're giving yourself a gift by giving them permission.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I want to end this on a kind of a fun note. And I don't know the answer, but I know it's a question that you're always ready to answer. If you have the gift of a 7-week sabbatical, where will we find you?
You will find me on the back of a horse in the midst of the biggest, furthest backcountry that I can find, chasing after an elk or something like that, hopefully with 1 or 2 or 3 of my kids in tow. But you will find me in the biggest space where I can feel as small as possible and be quiet. That's where you'll find me.
Wow. Well, when you find that place,
I'm always searching for it.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's some guy. I just read in the news the other day. He's now, I mean, he's a multi-billionaire, and he just very quietly closed on, I don't know, like 1 million acres or something, and he is now the largest individual landowner. I don't know if it's in the world or the United States, but millions of acres. And I'm always like thinking, why do you need that much land? But oh, it'd be really cool to be able to say, hey, like you say, I don't know, I'd do it on a horse. I'd probably do it on a four-wheeler, but just go out and just bathe in the greatness of God's creation would be awesome.
That's why I love it, man. It's just to revel in how big God is and how small we are.
Yep, absolutely. Oh man, Dusty, what a great conversation. Give us the link. How can people reach out to you, get that resource?
Yeah, I'd love for folks to download that leadership rules of engagement guide and make that an asset in your business, in your life. And you can simply go to Arcqus, ARCQUS.news. I just made that as the quickest, simplest, easiest way you can download it, Arcqus.news. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can follow my podcast, Leadership Unlocked. And for me, my personal mission statement is to enable success in others. So, Pat, I am just so overwhelmed with gratitude for being able to have a leadership conversation, a life conversation, and a faith conversation all in one.
Oh, I'm telling you, the pleasure is all mine to have somebody of your caliber and insights and everything is such a value to me personally and to our listeners. I'm so grateful for you. It's only because of you we're now in 32 countries on 6 continents, and we are spreading the warrior servant leader mindset, and we're changing our individual worlds where we're at right now. Because of you, it's growing to the whole world. So thank you for listening. Share this episode with somebody that needs to hear the message today. And until next week, as I always try to close, always strive to do the right things at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons. Love you all and see you next week.